Hello and welcome back, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning back in again. This is the second half of the presentation for the reading and key concept questions and exercises for Indonesia. Let's proceed to the next part of our presentation, and remember that you can stop and start this presentation for detailed clarity or repetition. History. The first people arrived in Indonesia around 40,000 years ago, and that time the country was still connected to Asia by land. Around 400 BC, Indonesia was invaded by other countries such as China and India. They introduced Buddhism and Hinduism in Indonesia. Indonesia was dominated by several Hindu and Buddhist kingdoms between the 7th and 13th century. In the 13th century, Arab traders arrived in the country and began to gain more power in Indonesia. By the end of the 16th century, Islam had replaced Buddhism and Hinduism as the main religion in the country. The kingdoms were defeated and broken into smaller Islamic states. The Portuguese were the first European explorers who arrived in Indonesia, and they arrived in 1515 and were soon followed by the Dutch and the British. The Europeans fought battles in Indonesia for control of the islands and its spices. The Dutch finally won and colonized Indonesia in the 17th century. They called their colony the East Indies, and they were a dominant power in Indonesia for 350 years. But in 1942, during World War II, the Japanese gained control over several Indonesian islands, and after the war had come to an end in 1945, the Indonesian people wanted to become an independent country. They were fed up with the Dutch, who became rich from growing coffee and exporting spices on the islands, and in 1949, the Dutch granted Indonesia its independence, and the country became a republic. Sukarno became the first president of the republic, and during his presidency, Sukarno slowly changed the country from a democracy towards a dictatorship. In 1967, a military general called Suharto overthrew Sukarno and appointed himself as the president. Suharto ruled as a dictator but made Indonesia a stable country with a growing economy, and in 1998, Suharto resigned and Indonesia became a democratic country again. Please proceed to answer the key concept questions and complete the exercises. Now, when you're finished, you may move on to the next part of the presentation on culture. Let's move on to the next presentation on culture. Indonesian culture is a complex mix of its original indigenous cultures and foreign influences. These foreign influences include India, China, the Middle East, and Europe. Language. More than 700 languages are spoken in Indonesia. The country's official language is Indonesia, also known as Bahasa Indonesia. At school, all Indonesian children learn the language of their island, and Bahasa Indonesia is the second language. Only 7% of the population speaks Bahasa Indonesia as a mother tongue. Indonesia is home to over 1,000 ethnic groups. Each of these groups have their own culture and speak their own language. Here's a chart for clarity about some of the largest languages within Indonesia. Now let's talk about food. Indonesian cuisine includes a collection of dishes that vary per island, and the country's indigenous techniques are combined with foreign elements, such as curries from India, kebabs from Middle East, and stir-frying from China. Sumatran dishes have foreign elements such as Indian curry and kebabs from the Middle East, and typical dishes from Java are mostly indigenous but have some Chinese influences too. The most common dishes in eastern Indonesia have Polynesian and Melanesian, areas in the Pacific Ocean, influences. Polynesia and Melanesia are regions in the Pacific Ocean. Most Indonesian dishes have very strong flavors and often include a combination of salty, sweet, and spicy taste. Most Indonesians like spicy dishes, and they make their meals spicier by adding a chili sauce called sambal. The most common dishes include the nasi goreng, which is fried rice with meat and vegetables, gado-gado, which is salad with steamed vegetables and eggs, and satay, which is grilled meat with sauce. The national dish of the country is tumpeng, which is a dish that combines elements of various culinary traditions of the country. Now let's go ahead and focus on clothing. The kebaya is considered the national Indonesian dress, and it is mostly worn by women of Javanese, Balinese, and Sudanese women. It is a long-sleeved blouse that is often worn with a sarong, a long piece of cloth wrapped around the body from waist down. The sarong is worn by both men and women and is also a popular piece of clothing in other Southeast Asian countries. The patterns along the clothing often reflect the region where the person is from, so these traditional types of clothing are mostly worn at celebrations such as weddings and other formal occasions. Many Indonesian women also wear a hijab, which is Muslim type of veil. Now, there are many different types of headwear in Indonesia, but these different types often vary per island or culture. The peki is the most common type and is considered the national type of headgear, and it is worn by men throughout the country. Now you may proceed to answer the key concept questions or complete the exercises. Let's resume with the next and final part of our presentation on attractions in Indonesia. The Baliem Valley. Baliem Valley is located on the highlands of New Guinea, and the area was known to the outside world until was unknown to the outside world until 1938, when a large agricultural population was discovered. The tribes that live in this area have retained their traditional ways of life, and the valley has beautiful mountain views, rivers, and green fields. Next down here is the Borobudur, which is located in Java and is one of the most famous Buddhist temples in the world. It was built in the 9th century and is the Seleucid kingdom. In the 14th century, the temples were abandoned for unknown reasons and were hidden in the jungle under layers of volcanic ash. Currently, the Borobudur is one of the most popular attractions in all of Indonesia. Now let's move on up here to the Prambanan temples. The Prambanan temples were built in the 9th century and are located in the center of Java. The complex consists of 500 Hindu temples, and the main temples are dedicated to Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. All of them are manifestations of God in Hinduism. The biggest temple is 130 feet tall. Down here is the Tanjung Puting National Park, and the Tanjung Puting National Park is located in the south of Borneo. The park has a large variety of different ecosystems, such as rainforests and mangrove swamps, and Tanjung Puting is one of the only places in the world where visitors can see orangutans in the wild. The national park is one of Indonesia's most important treasures, and the government works hard to protect the forest and its wildlife. And finally down here is Ubud. Ubud is a remarkable town in Bali that is famous for its crafts, traditional dances, and temples. The area surrounding Ubud is made up of dense rainforest, farms, and beautiful rice terraces. The area is considered the cultural center of the island and attracts many visitors each year. So there you guys have it. That is everything I want you to know about Indonesia and its history, geography, and culture all together in one. I hope you found this reading to be a helpful tool and guide, and moreover, I wish you the best of luck in completing the rest of the lesson. Thank you very much for tuning in.